this is Brad Bowman from Heaven's Metal Magazine. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Rex Carroll of Whitecross. Check out this conversation where Rex takes us back to the 70s and the beginning of his musical journey. We also talk a little bit about the current state of Whitecross and what's coming next. Enjoy.
Hello.
Well, there you are.
Hey, Brad.
Yeah, that's a pretty guitar you got behind you.
Oh, yeah.
Is it your Michael Schenker special?
No, dude. This right here.
Ah.
Got a spotlight trained on you. No, I'm not a fan at all. No. Don't know any of their music. No. No. I don't really know any of their songs. just a casual.
It's not every day I get a private concert by Rex Carroll.
Now, Dan, you were at the BMI Center, right?
Yeah, I was at the BMI Center all 3 days.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I haven't played all day, so.
Oh, no, you go right ahead.
If it's not up to speed. But yeah, so we were in the. Whoa. Something happened. It went away and then it came back.
Okay. Can you see me? Hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see you and hear you just fine.
So at the BMI Center, you may recall seeing he had a bunch of guitars on the walls, right?
Yeah.
And in the backstage area, what passed for the green room, he had this hanging on the wall with a couple other Gibson's guitars that he had. And I picked it up and I was noodling on it. And as I continued to noodle on it, like progressively, like for the entire weekend, I couldn't put it down. So I was finally like, dude, please let me have this guitar. So, and I knew that, he's got so much gear there that, I don't know what he's got, but I asked him, could I work out something with you? So they did. And I have the guitar now, and it's kind of like it's sort of quickly becoming my number one instrument.
That's fantastic.
And I still have my white Super Strat guitar that I played on at the gig, but I wanted a guitar with a hardtail, the tailpiece, as opposed to the floating bridge with the Floyd Rose, because the Floyd Rose is awesome. Don't get me wrong on that, but it's such a pain in the butt to just keep after it and just keep tuning it. And it's nice to have something that you just tune it and it stays in tune. So anyways. All right. So we're recording this and it'll be edited down for broadcast later.
Yeah. We're going to put on Heaven's Metal magazine website. Yeah. Doug Van Pelt. Yep. Still have not met him face to face. I've been writing for him for about a couple of years now. And
okay.
I've been doing a few of these video interviews. I'm a filmmaker by trade. I work for the Air Force Research Lab up at Wright Pat.
Really? That's very cool.
So I do this. It's just for my love of music. I was never good enough of a musician to play, so I became a super fan. And
What do you play? You guitar player?
Oh yeah, I don't even call it that.
Yeah,
I have a
you're a guitar enthusiast.
I have a guitar. Yes, I have a bass. Yes,
Well,
I
at the
play
rate,
bass good
at the
enough.
rate that they keep making guitars, I think there's enough guitars. No, I think every man, woman, and child on the planet should have about 17 guitars.
That sounds great for me. Okay, Rex. Hey, if you don't mind, I would like to go all the way back to the '80s with you, man.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. We'll go back to the beginnings of. Doug Van Pelt is a friend of mine. I've known him probably since 1987, when White Cross first came out.
Now, before White Cross, you were in Fierce Heart, right?
Yeah. I actually, I'll go back. I'll go back to 1977 when I was a freshman at Northern Illinois University. Just started working on a guitar performance major, and I had just auditioned for a band that played Christian music. And I thought that was so cool because as a guitar player all through my high school career, the one thing that always seemed the glaring omission to me was, man, you got bands that cover every kind of music, but not a single one of them gives God the credit. And that's all I just thought, well, somebody's got to give God the credit. So if nobody else will do it, I guess I'll have to do it. And it was just as simple as that. And as a student, as a freshman on campus, and then there was a group from Chicago that came out to made the 2.5-hour drive out to DeKalb, Illinois, a group called Resurrection Band. And so I met all of them, and Glenn Kaiser was like, "Who's the squirrely kid with the afro in those days?" And you can ask Glenn about it because he remembers it too. Ask him if he remembers the squirrely kid who later went on and started White Cross, and that was really impactful for me, because I was like, wow, this is really cool, because this group Resurrection Band, this is like the first group that I had ever seen that was like-minded. That, for me, it was something that I was imagining that I wanted to do. And here's a group that's already doing it. Just go out and give, and of course, so much more. Glenn would, from day one, you can't get him to shut up. He's like, he'll play music for 40 minutes and he'll preach for 2.5 hours, because that's just how he is. So, but that was great for me. I was like, that provided me a template of what I thought would be really cool. Pardon me while I take my daily meds. So yeah. So fast forwarding from there into my senior year, I was getting ready to graduate in 1982. So if you do the math, that means that I went to school for 5 years, working on a 4-year degree. I wasn't the best or the brightest student. I was smart enough to do the work. Eventually I did get my degree, but as I was getting ready to graduate, there was, and all this is like way before the internet was ever a thing. So you have to imagine an era where you get all your information from newspapers and magazines. So there was a magazine that I found to be the most consistently reliable for the rock and roll scene, and that was an import magazine from England called Kerrang. Kerrang, what a strange name for a magazine, because when you go like this, the sound that it makes, Kerrang. And that was the idea of the magazine. So I used to follow that magazine, and I was a huge Deep Purple fan growing up. that was like a lot of my ideas about songwriting come from just breaking down a lot of Ritchie Blackmore things. He was probably my first guitar hero, and then of course there have been many since then. All of them, modern, old school, new school, and all points in between. And I used to listen to a lot of blues too, and I still do. I love the blues. So where was it? Yeah, so Deep Purple was like one of my bands, and that was one of my favorite bands. And then when Ritchie Blackmore left the group and started Rainbow with a singer named Ronnie James Dio, I followed that band. And I followed then Deep Purple, Mark One with Nikki Simper. Hugh Evans, I think, was the singer. Rod Evans, that was the first singer. And then Mark II with Ian Gillan and Roger Glover came in to play the bass. And then the Mark III lineup was when they introduced the 19-year-old David Coverdale to the world, and Glenn Hughes took over on the bass, and that was the Mark III lineup. So that Mark III lineup, they recruited another guitar player named Tommy Bowman, and they released one album, Come Taste the Band. I think I still have that vinyl somewhere. I've gotten rid of a lot of my vinyls just because my son kicked out half of my stuff to make room for his studio, which is like next door to mine. He's a film major too, by the way. He's well on his way to an awesome career with film and audio and lighting, and he loves concert lighting, and he does a lot of work in that area. But anyways, so Whitesnake was a band that was a splinter group from Deep Purple that David Coverdale had started. And they had like 4 albums out as imports that they had made in the UK. And so people in 1984, I think, they released Slide It In on Geffen Records. That was like their American debut. And then a couple years later, in 1986, they released the big album, the one that has all the songs on it, Here I Go Again, stuff that they play in the supermarkets now.
Yeah, which makes me feel so old.
Because you are. It's because you are.
Yeah, that's John Sykes played guitar.
John Sykes was another guitar hero. One of the things that I took from John Sykes was the concept of always putting a vibrato on. Don't just play your chords. Don't just sit there on the chord. Like put a vibrato on it, make it sing. That was something I was always interested in. I always wanted to keep the sound moving and humanize it. Make it feel like if the guitar was human and if the guitar was singing, what sound would it make? It wouldn't just make like a static note. It would always have some vocal vibrato to it.
Right. Violin players do the same thing.
That's one concept of mine. So that album came out, and before that album came out, back in '82, I had read in a magazine, in the Kerrang magazines. I'll try to tie it all together here for you. In the Kerrang magazine, I had read that David Coverdale had 2 guitar players in his band, and I thought they were both pretty terrible. But he was trying to do a different thing, get a new identity. I understand now more of the reasons why he didn't just immediately go out and look for another guy who sounded like Ritchie Blackmore. It's easier to understand now. But anyways, I read in the magazine he's fired both of his guitar players and is currently seeking a replacement. I was like, oh, I was like Michael J. Fox in the movie Back to the Future. Come on, Marty, you got to send in your demo tape to the record company. If you don't, how will you ever know? It was just like that. So I thought, well, if I don't do anything about this, I will hate myself forever, because you never know anything if you don't try, at least try. So I made a cassette tape of myself playing the guitar, and I mailed it in to the address on the back of the record company. I was like, glad that's done. So at least that stone has been turned over. There's most likely nothing underneath that rock, but at least I turned over the stone, right? So then about a month later, my phone rings, and it's Jim Delahant from Atlantic Records, and he's the A&R director of the entire label. There's nobody above him. He signed he signed an unknown band called Foreigner. Then he signed another group that a few people have heard of called AC/DC. And then he wanted to work with me, and I'm like, what? And he said, he assured me immediately. He said, well, you have, first of all, Whitesnake is no longer on our label. They bolted. They went to Geffen. He was really unhappy with them about that at the time. So you have no shot at that. He's got a new guy. He's got an English guy named John Sykes that I had never heard of. Like only just some guy, right?
Yeah.
who made like one of the most brilliant rock albums of all time, for guitar players anyways. So he said, but let's make a band around you. And I was like, really? And I've never completely understood why he wanted to do that. He heard something in my guitar playing that he liked, and I think he had the idea that he could do for a rock band like Maurice Starr did when he auditioned a bunch of 11-year-olds and signed them up, and he drilled them on singing lessons and acting lessons and dance lessons, and created a group called New Kids on the Block. And it was, hyper successful, as you all know, and sold millions and millions of records, and made him, Maurice Starr is like filthy rich. So I think that Jim had an idea that he could create a supergroup that, had his fingerprints all over it. He's like, well, I take an unknown guitar player, I'll make a band, and I'll build it in, according to my own ideas as a producer. So I owe, and Mr. Delahant was just fabulous, absolutely the best coach and mentor for about 3 years. It was unbelievable, the amount of knowledge, and he taught me how to play guitar. And he's like, well, you got to play this lick, and you got to do this like this, and do this like that. And he broke down everything that I played, and I said, well, why do I have to do that? And he goes, well, because that's how Gary Moore would do it. And I got all sassy with him one day, and I said, oh yeah, well, what would you know about Gary Moore? I said, well, the last time I was in the studio hanging with Gary Moore, I think in his lifetime, I think that Mr. Delahant was probably the world's, I would go as far as to say, I think he was the world's foremost authority on blues and rock guitar. He knew everything about everyone, and he knew the entire history of American blues, and he knew where, like, this guy comes from here and this guy comes from there, and there's this sound, from the deep South, and there's this other, like, he knew the different styles of the blues and things like that, and he knew how it all fit together in rock and roll. And I'm just gonna turn on the fan, and feel free to interrupt me and fast forward, if you need me to pick up the pace, I can pick up the pace a little bit. But he taught me, and then he found the road manager from Humble Pie in Peter Frampton, found a singer from Virginia Beach, Virginia, brought him to the label, and Jim listened to it and said, this guy'd be perfect with Rex. So that was how I got started in the music business. And there was a young up and coming engineer who was pretty hot. He was getting well known by the record companies, a guy named Chris Lordalgi, and his brother, his younger punk brother, Tom Lordalgi. And between the two of them, they have like a list of Grammy awards that just goes as long as your arm. It's incredible. So the work that those guys have done. And what else? So that was my education in the music business. It was my crash course. And the only thing about that whole experience that I took from that, if I had not have gone through that experience, I'm pretty confident there would be no White Cross, because I learned many things. I had never been in a recording studio before. From Larry Elkins, I learned about songwriting. I had a good start on songwriting, but I didn't have all the puzzle pieces fit together. So I learned in that whole experience of doing the band Fierce Heart for the first time. I learned just a lot of the ins and outs. I learned about music publishing, which has saved my butt many times. Hang on to your publishing, kids. If you're starting a band, and if you're ever offered a label contract, and of course label contracts are not what they used to be. It used to be a thing where you sign your life away, and the lives of your firstborn kids. You've heard all of those horror stories about how it used to be. Well, kid, we're going to be rich and you're going to be famous. How's that sound? Yeah, just sign right here, and here, and here, and here, and here. Okay, that's all good. And publishing is the thing where they get you. So hang on to your publishing. That's a big thing. So then from there, we went out, we did a record, and nothing much happened. And then I'm sitting back at home teaching guitar lessons again at the local music store, kind of wondering, well, what's next? What am I going to do next? And then one day in my teaching, Scotty Wenzel walks through my door, and he's like, well, I can't find a guitar player. I need a lead guitar player. I have a group called White Cross, and I need a lead player, and I can't find anybody. So I figured I'd try to bone up on my guitar skills a little bit. So I think we might have had like maybe 2 lessons. I don't know if we got as far as 3 lessons together, but he's not the type of personality to do well with, like, he didn't really want to learn guitar like the traditional way, to learn scales and fingerings and to really be a student of the guitar. And that was the only way that I knew how to teach back then. Over the period of many decades, I have learned to become a much more compassionate music teacher with my students, and I try to have empathy to where everybody is at. Even if somebody has never held a guitar pick before, that's a challenge. Let's talk about just how do we hold on to the pick. Just little small things, and it's hilarious with little kids. 8-year-old kids come in, and it takes them. If you have a half-hour lesson, it takes them 8 minutes to figure out how to take their jacket off and to open the guitar case and to pick up the guitar out of the case and to sit down on the chair. It takes them like 8 or 9 minutes just to do that. And then it's the same thing in reverse. So you get farther and farther behind as you're going along. So I see it as progress. Somebody like, oh, after 6 months, they know how to walk in the door, they know how to hang up their jacket and pick up their guitar and sit down on their chair, and okay, they're ready to go. Guitar is a wonderful thing, and music is a wonderful thing, but it takes time, and it just is something that I grew up with it. So it's something that I've always wanted to do, is to play music. And when I met Scotty, I was like, okay, so here is, I was building a whole backlog of ideas for songs that I wanted to work on. And so I came over to Scotty's band practice, and he had started a band with guys from his youth group, and nobody really knew how to play at all, really. And I was like, oh boy, this is worse than I thought it was. I expected a train wreck, but it's like, no, these guys would have to practice for 2 years before they'd be ready even to have a train wreck. It was starting from like below zero, below ground level. It's like I got to dig out of the trench just to get up to like surface level, and then we can start to build. So it took a while. It really did. But I heard Scotty sing, and it's like, oh yeah, this sounds great. And I was like, no, I was aware of the '80s rock scene. I'm a product of my era. I learned how to play guitar during the '70s. There was a lot of great guitar music happening in the '70s, and then I think it really came to a point in the '80s with the the rock guitar styles and the lead guitar styles. That was like the logical progression of where that went to. So there was a lot of good things about music in the '80s, and there were some bad things too. One, everything became very image conscious after Van Halen came out. That was kind of the template for every band. You say, well, you either got to look like Van Halen or you got to look like Motley Crue. And, there was that's the dress code. And, that was really tough for guys like me who had, marginal thinning hair from the beginning. And, this is the way we like our celebrities to be young and beautiful. And we like that for our musicians, and we prefer that look for everybody. I think even to an extent we elect presidents on, well, which one's the more attractive physical specimen. I think we vote for how somebody looks rather than the they can talk about their ideas all day long, but I think we vote for people who look like they belong on the cover of a magazine. Anyways, so that was like the part about the '80s that was not good. And I think the fashion, the music became a fashion thing, and the songs became very predictable, and the whole thing, it kind of imploded in the early to mid '90s. And then groups like Nirvana and Pearl Jam took over. And that was the end of the '80s era, that era of musicians. Although Whitecross really came into vogue. I mean, we started in 1985. I had recorded the Fierce Heart album. I started with Atlantic Records in 1982. My record we recorded in 1984. That came out in '85. Later that year, I met Scotty. We started Whitecross in like the fall of '85, and then we got signed with a very tiny label called Pure Metal Records, and our record came out in the spring of 1987. It came out about a month before Cornerstone Festival. And a very fortuitous timing of just being in the right place at the right time. And I had, all through that time, I had a relationship with Glenn Kaiser, He's a friend of mine and still is. We're doing a concert together in December. Just the two of us. So the White Cross. So I think because of that, so we got on to the Cornerstone Festival. We had a late night, like a 1 a.m. booking, and then there was a cancellation, and they decided to move us up in the billing. So we played at we had a very good time slot in the mid afternoon. There was like three stages for bands at that point. It was still happening in the first couple of years up until about 1990. It was in Grays Lake, Illinois, which was like 30 minutes from my house. That's where I live. So it was great when it started because we'd just go out during the daytime and listen to the speakers. And then we'd go back in the evening and take in the concerts. And so we got to play on the side stage. They had the main stage, side stage, and then they had a late night stage. And that was it. So they were going to put us on the late night stage at about like 1 a.m. or something like that. And then they moved us up to the side stage, afternoon stage. And then they had their headlining bands on the main stage. And so that was the whole deal. That was the sum total of Cornerstone. And then they moved down to Bushnell. And then it mushroomed from that point. And then all of a sudden, every band and their brother is setting up, hey, if you can bring a portable generator, you can set up a little, get a couple of 4x8 sheets of plywood down on the ground. You can have your own little mini stage, and you can say that you have played at Cornerstone.
Yeah, the famous generator stages.
Yeah, and that's what it eventually devolved to that. But I was there. I attended from the very first Cornerstone, and those early days of the festival were a lot of fun. And we've had a bunch of that this year with the Immortal Fest, and there's a lot of excitement about next year's. So it's like if we're able to keep it up, and if the promoter, Mr. Barhorst, if he's able to keep organizing the festival, there's just really a lot of enthusiasm for this festival. It's like the place where the Christian rock crowd can come together as a community and celebrate all of our favorite bands. Both the young ones and the older ones, like White Cross, that have been around for a while.
Yeah,
So,
and I never had the opportunity to see you guys back in the day. I listened to you. It was so funny because I brought my son. My son was with me, and he wanted to see you. He's a guitarist. He's a phenomenal guitar player.
Awesome.
And so he was like, I need to see Rex. I got to see Rex Carroll. I was like, okay, cool. So I brought him, and I said, Anthony, I don't remember listening to White Cross as much as I did. I was more of I was a huge Barren Cross fan, and I was big into Daniel Band. So I got to see both of those bands at BMI. It was great. I said, I listened to White Cross a lot, but I didn't listen to as much as the other guys. Well, then you guys hit the stage, and every song that you did, I was singing along. I knew every word. And he turned and looked at me and said, I think you listened to them a little more than you remembered, Dad.
Maybe more than you realized.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah. So who would have thought, right? So I remember back in the beginning, I was certainly very aware of the rock scene, and as I was getting to know Scotty, Scotty was like, "Well, I listened to Stryper, and I listened to Res Band, and I listened to some of the Christian groups, and then in the secular music, as we called it back then." So I'll listen to basically he would listen to the radio. Yeah. Like the popular groups. He liked Boston and Kansas. And I said, well, your vocal sounds very similar to Stephen Piercy from Rat. And he's like, who's that? He never heard it. I kid you not. He'd never heard of him. He had no idea whatsoever. And I thought to myself, go ahead.
Let me interrupt you real quick. Zoom is telling me I got 5 minutes left on this meeting.
Okay.
Let me set up another meeting and send you another link, and then we can continue.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I'll be here. Okay.
Okay.
So let's try that again. So what key is that in?
I have no idea.
I should tell by the double dots. So I'm in key of D. So.
I told you I took guitar lessons for a year. I took classical guitar my senior year in high school, 1985. And no, it was my junior year. Sorry about that. So it was 1985. And I quickly realized that, I wanted to be, the next Rick Emmett, but it wasn't to be,
Right. What a great song. Great band.
Great song. Yeah. I went back and the last couple of days and listened to the Fierce Heart stuff. And I noticed that the sonic quality of the early White Cross albums was actually very good for the limited budget you guys had. Were you did you act as producer on those albums?
Well, let me just tell you the truth as I see it. First of all, if you go by the numbers, I think the first Fierce Heart album had a studio budget of about $98,500, and there was a few more additional expenses. I think the total budget on that album was somewhere around $110,000, which by the standards of that day, they were like, okay, this is done definitely, for Atlantic standards. They were like, well, this is definitely a smaller budget, but it's not the cheapest budget either. They're like, this is, we spent a fair amount of money on this, and they did get Chris Lord-Alge to produce it. And I was learning just like every day was just an eye-opening experience, many stories from the studio. And also many lessons learned, not just only about music, but how do you comport yourself as a human being, and best, ways in which you get along with your fellow humans. So I learned lessons through both positive examples and many negative examples. So yeah, that's a polite way of saying there was some interesting situations in that whole deal. And so I carried all of that knowledge into with White Cross. We had the total budget for the entire album with the artwork and everything was about $7,400. About $6,000 of that was in the studio. That was the money that I spent, and then they dropped like another $1,200-$1,300 on the cover, and that was it. Slap it, wrap it, get it out there, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks.
And this is on Pure Metal, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And technically, well, okay. So Caesar Kalinowski, who is a name that some people would know from that era. He was very involved in the Christian rock scene at that time. And also Caesar was responsible for bringing the White Cross underground demo tapes to Pure Metal, and they got a hold of us, and so we signed with Pure Metal. They were the only label that offered us a deal. And Caesar was instrumental in that. Caesar's name is listed as the producer. We actually, the two of us, worked on the album together, but neither one of us really knew what we were doing as far as like mixing. Caesar had the panache to represent as, an authoritative type person, like, well, like to pass himself off as I know what this is all about. But the reality is we had an engineer at our local backyard studio, and between the engineer and myself and Caesar, and none of us totally knew what we were doing, but there was a lot of energy on that album. And I, for one, played like my pants were on fire, because I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I'm getting really old, and I haven't made it yet. It's like, oh, I'm gonna be washed up and washed out of music altogether. I'll be working at 7-Eleven and play guitar on Sunday morning in the church band, and that's gonna be it for me. So I really played like my pants were on fire, like I said, and Scotty had honestly, he had no idea what he was capable of, and nobody. I can also say this, that nobody from the band really believed in what was happening. Yeah, we're making a record. The day I remember the look on Scotty's face when I played, we had been working on a song called Enough is Enough. And it finally got to the point where everything was recorded, and it had guitar solos and Scotty's vocals and backing vocals, and everything was all put together. And he walked into the studio and we were mixing it, and he sat there and he said something along the lines of, "Who's that?" Like, what band is that? That sounds pretty cool. Who are those guys? I said, "That's you." He said, "No." And I said, "Yeah, that's all of us together. That's you singing." And his eyes just kind of like turned into like glass, like he just went into a different dimension. And he just sat there and just kind of his jaw kind of stood down, and like the drool coming out. And he had a moment. He couldn't believe that was his own voice coming out of the speakers. Nobody had any idea. But I was like, no, come on, guys, stick with this. We're going to do this. And these are the songs we're going to do. And everybody's like, yeah. Rex is, he's off on a different planet somewhere. I don't know any rock stars. Do you know any rock stars? What makes you think you get to be a rock star? Like, well, I'm not trying to be a rock star. I'm just trying to make an album here, because I have ideas for these songs. And so, so that's how those are the beginnings. And me personally, it's embarrassing. I thank you for the compliment. I don't think the technical quality of the first album especially is not up to any kind of professional standard for myself personally. It's very difficult for me to listen to the first album.
I did qualify that by saying limited budget, because I knew your metal never gave anybody any budget.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I'll say this, Rex. So this came out in '87. Up until then, we had, the Striper albums, of course, and there was, Barren Cross was out, but there were never any, and Guitar Hero albums. Right. And it was the album where, and this was it. This was like the first album that was a Guitar Hero album.
Yeah, I know.
You put when Nagasaki. The first time I heard that, I was like, okay, this guy's he's on another level. And so that was amazing. So I was a freshman in college when this came out.
Okay.
And I had a metalhead. I went to art school. So here I am, a Christian in art school. So you can imagine I was very much in the minority.
So are you ready for your life drawing class?
Yeah. 2 years of life drawing. That was a lot of fun. But I had my Walkman with my cassette collection, and people were making fun of me because I was listening to all these Christian bands. Yeah. And I was like, well, have you ever heard them? And he was like, no. So, you've heard this, you've heard 100 people tell you that story where they say, okay, listen to this. And you play anything Rex Carroll plays on, and suddenly they're like, okay, these guys don't suck. So
that's the whole thing, isn't it? Just try not to suck.
Well, even beyond that, it was for so long listening to Christian music was this is good for a Christian band.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
And suddenly it's this.
Yeah, and I detected a lot of groups that had that attitude. Well, we know that we're just like Joe average weekend bar band. That's our talent level, but it's good enough for a Christian deal.
Yeah.
So we'll go for a Christian deal because we can do something there. We'll never be good enough to be like a real band. If you're not good enough for a real record label, well, you can get signed by a Christian record label.
Yeah. Well, let me ask
you. There was a mentality of that. That was
Let me ask you a question, Rex. So this album came out, and I know more people than just Christians heard it. Did you ever get contacted by any other bands? You were in Chicago, so you weren't in the LA Sunset Strip scene.
No.
But did you get contacted from any other bands because of the White Cross stuff?
Well, when we were in the studio working on our second album, our engineer goes, "Hey Rex, you have a phone call." I said, "Okay, who is it?" He says it's Fred Curry from Cinderella. I'm like, "What?" Okay, so I took the call and like, "Hey man," I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." Like, "I'm over at a party at Stephen Piercy's house, man, and Stephen just wanted me to tell you that he is so honored that there's a band that tries to sound just like him. Oh, he's so honored, and he wanted me to tell you that, bro." I'm not, and to this day, I'm like, I don't know, was that like were they all sitting around getting stoned and laughing like, "Hey, check this out," and somebody goes, "Hey, check this out," and they're probably just having a good laugh about it because the sound quality wasn't that great, but I don't even think they picked up on the Christian element of the lyrics. I think they just heard it and they go, "Hey, listen to this. It sounds like you. Hey, man, check this out. It sounds like you, Stephen." And they're probably just laughing about it, and he's just like, "Well, let's call him up." So I've met a couple people just haphazardly. When you're in the music business, you run into people here and there. But that's just kind of the nature of the business. It's professional, other like-minded professionals that you meet
right.
that are doing the same things that you do. But I wouldn't, I can't sit here and tell you, "Oh yeah, Michael Schenker's my buddy and we hang out." No, there's nothing like that. Never met Eddie Van Halen, anything like that. I saw him a couple times. I saw him in '79, I think.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
No, that was great. Saw him a couple times. I saw him on their Women and Children First tour, and then I saw them on their Diver Down tour.
I never got to see them.
I saw the early Van Halen with David Lee Roth when they were in their full, the original vibe of what the original era of their sound and what they were all about when they started out. So that was really cool. Made a big impression.
Yeah, I bet. So you've mentioned Michael Schenker. You've mentioned Tommy Bolin and Blackmore.
Richie Blackmore. Yeah, Johnny Winter is another huge influence.
Johnny Winters. Okay, that's like that blues influence you were talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, Foghat was another band I like to listen to.
Oh yeah.
ZZ Top and Ted Nugent. Anything with a guitar in it. Climax Blues Band was actually a great band. Santana, I used to listen to him. I loved Black Sabbath. Had all of their albums at one point, and I took great pride in that I knew how to play every song from every album. That was very important to me at the time. And that was one of the bands that influenced me these guys, they talk about spiritual things all the time. And yet they never give God credit for anything. It's like God deserves a band that will just simply just give him the credit. Again, so in an indirect way, Black Sabbath had an influence on me. It's like, well, somebody's got to praise the Lord. And as I like to say to people, it's like God doesn't need you to praise him. He can take an inanimate object. He can make this guitar, can all of a sudden it can have a mouth and it can open its mouth and sing praise to the Lord. But he doesn't do that. He gives you the opportunity to understand who you are in relationship to God. He's the creator, you're the creation. And that relationship is broken, and you can have a way back through Jesus Christ, all the fundamental tenets of our faith. And you can choose to praise him now, but you will praise him later, one way or the other. And that's what it's going to be about, for the rest of eternity, is just caught up in that praise. And you can have that right now. So I just thought, well, there needs to be a band that will do that. And that was always my take on Christian rock. Scotty wanted to be an evangelist in a rock band. That was very important, which I supported. I support that. I still do. And as people know, now we have a new singer now for the last couple of years that we're going forward with David Roberts. And the mission of the band White Cross is the same now as it was then. We are a rock band that gives God the credit, and we're also about evangelism. And we want to see people come into the kingdom. We want our music to be a tool that God can use to reach people wherever they're at. And it has certainly reached me and sustained me through many things. And at many times in my life, I've been a very reluctant servant of the Lord. And many times I've been like a Jonah. It's like, Rex, you do this and that. No, I want to do this other. And circumstances in my life bring me back around to, okay, God, I'll do it your way. So, I have those experiences. I think a lot of us do.
Yeah, and that's a lesson we never learn, is it?
Well, there are many lessons in life. At times I pray, God, please, like when I catch myself being like impatient, or I've had to learn to calm down a lot. So there's certain things I've said, God, please help me to learn this lesson permanently and forever, so that I don't have to come back to this classroom again for remedial training. Allow me to learn my lesson once and for all, so that I can move on with the Spirit into, okay, great, you finally got that down. Let's move on to the next thing. I want to advance in the things of the Lord. So,
well, Rex, we don't have that much
process. Up, I guess.
Yeah, we don't have that much time left, but I would like to jump forward to.
That's a song by Van Halen.
Yeah,
might as well jump.
And the Pointer Sisters. Don't forget the Pointer Sisters.
Okay.
So the first time I heard Dave, the new singer, was the Bloodgood White Cross show at BMI.
Oh yeah.
And I was floored. I was like, okay, who they're gonna get to replace Scotty? Because Scotty
is iconic.
Signature sound.
Right.
But
there is no replacing Scotty. You could try for a million years, unless somebody has Stephen Piercy's number. I could call Steve and say, hey, Stephen,
yeah,
for White Cross. Hey, man.
Well, Dave, he is more of a Ronnie James Dio style singer.
Yeah.
Where did you find him?
People talk about Dave, and I love the comparisons. They go, some people say, oh, he really reminds me of Ronnie James Dio. I'm like, yeah, I hear that at times. Oh, he really sounds like David Coverdale. I'm like, yeah, I hear that at times. Somebody said, he reminds me of old Queensryche. I'm like, well, I think he's a little scratchy or something than that, but at times, I guess, But, everybody loves, his voice is just like, it really fits. for so many things that he does really well. And he's from Dallas area. And I think it was Mike, our drummer, who said, "Hey Rex, there's this guy down here, and he sings in a Whitesnake tribute band." I'm like, "Oh, he's got a lot of stones if he thinks he's good enough to front a Whitesnake tribute." So I checked it out, and I was like, "Okay, we should take a shot with him." And was very, very cautious in moving forward with Dave, because it's like he comes from a long career singing in mainstream oriented rock bands. And it's like, well, White Cross is a ministry, and how do you feel about being in a Christian band? And he loves it. He says, "Dude, I always want to have a chance to be in a situation where I can worship God." He says, "This is amazing." It's been really great for him. And he's told me 100 times, he said, "Dude, I would quit all my other bands right now just to be with White Cross. If we had a tour or something like that." Now, of course, there's not that many bands that are touring full time, and we did for a long time. We did it as long as we could, and we burned out after like 6 years.
Yeah,
being on the road straight. But Disciple is out there touring full time. There's a couple bands that are doing it. A couple bands that are touring full time, but they're not living very well.
right.
Yeah,
I know it's a slog for Disciple.
We probably know who they are. It's just a hard thing. So White Cross plays. We're trying to become more active again. So our itinerary is picking up a little bit, and we had a wonderful trip to India in 2019.
Okay.
That's probably one of the high points of my music career, was being over there for like 14 days. It was amazing, just absolutely amazing. And Dave fits fantastically. I don't know how else to put it. He sounds great on the. So we wanted to have something. So all we have is just pre-production work that we're working on. So I just kind of like cleaned up the mixes a little bit on some of the pre-production stuff. So we were able to put out that 3-song demo CD that's out right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
So what that is, it's a preview of what's coming, because we're working on the rest of the album. In fact, later on tonight, I'll be on FaceTime with Dave, and we have some things that we're working on for one of the songs.
Yeah, the Fear No Evil is the one that is that's very DOS.
That's got the Dio kind of thing on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed on the 3 songs there.
I love that song.
So
I love all the songs. I love the messages.
Yeah,
I love the lyrics. I love the way the band sounds. I love the vocals. I'm like, wow, this is so much fun.
It's solid, man. It's solid. And I'll say this: the songwriting on this is more your 70s influences are bleeding through on these songs, more so than the 80s stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, which is great, which is fantastic. Okay, so let me ask you a question: are you planning on doing anything with Jimmy Bennett anytime?
We have talked about possibly somebody. It's one of the organizers of the festival that said maybe we'll invite King James for the next Immortal Fest. Jimmy and I have slowed down. King James is a band that it never caught on to the same level as White Cross. Some of that may have to do with timing. People like what they like. I personally enjoy being with King James because I love Jimmy is a great friend of mine, and I love his ministry.
Yeah,
and he's a wonderful preacher, and God always has great messages that he brings out. to people through Jimmy and through his life is a wonderful testimony, and his family. So I love King James, and I love when we have a chance to be together, which is less often. So, but
he's in Atlanta, correct? He's
from the Atlanta area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that you say that the first King James album may have not caught on. It caught on in my house. the Miracle song.
That's
oh
awesome.
My gosh, we played that over and over and over again.
Yeah, again, that's one of those things. It's like I love the messages that we have in King James.
That the story that tells a story, and
right.
wow, it's
It's a true story.
Yes.
So all of that band is inspirational to me on those kinds of levels. And our last album that we did, the Maximus album, are you familiar with that one?
Yes.
Okay, so that album I looked at that album as kind of a second chance to make a first impression. And again, we had a really solid budget to make the album that we wanted to make. And we just had wonderful individuals with that. We had John Lowry. Again, John is from Petra, and John has become another friend to me, and not so much a mentor, but a teacher in ways. I've learned many things from John, and he's wonderful in the studio. He's scary in the studio. He's got an electronics degree and a music degree.
Oh, he's another Tom Schultz.
He'll sit there and he'll go, that's about a quarter step flat. Why don't you try this harmony on top of that? Then he'll turn around a split second later and go, yeah, I think I need to rewire this microphone. It's I can hear a little bit of the capacitance is off on this, so I think I need to get in there and change the filter cap. He understands the signal coming through the wire. And he understands the musicality of, it's like this part's a little busy. Let's work on this section of the song a little bit. Let's develop this bridge. Well, so he's scary. He's just really fun guy in the studio. Scary in a good way. Scary good. So again, all of my band experiences have been like, wow, just a lot of great people that I've worked with over the years.
Now, the Rex Carroll band, that's your blues stuff. I got a buddy of mine. I'll shout his name out, Keith Lewis, because he'll listen to this. He's my partner at work. We work together all the time, and he's a really good blues guitarist. He'd never heard that. And I played that for him. I was like, you got to hear this. And he was like, oh, yeah, this is great. So you've got a fan in Keith Lewis. So.
All right. Matt Hunt helped me out with that. I had completed that album and I sat on it for 3 years. I didn't know what to do with it. Oh man. Yeah. It's Matt said, well, give it to me. I'll put it out and it'll do great. And it's gone into it's as if I understand correctly, it's at the end of the third pressing now. So we're going to press it again pretty soon.
That's great. Now that's Boone's Overstock, right? That's Matt Hunt, Boone's Overstock.
That's Matt. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just make sure.
Retroactive Records, Boone's Overstock. He's got a metal label too.
He released the new Triton record, I believe.
Yeah, he does a lot of re-releases. He'll buy like quantities of old like out of print things. That's a popular thing to do. Bombworks, that's his metal label.
Oh yeah.
Bombworks, Retroactive, Boone's Overstock. It's all in there.
Well, hey, Rex, we're coming down to the end of our allotted time. Is there anything you want to, anything you would like to say, or anything you guys are working on for us to look
forward to? Shout out to Doug. It's been my compatriot in this rock and roll journey that we've all been on since the mid '80s, with bringing Christian music out of the hymnal and into the amplifiers.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Rocking out with Jesus. It's a great thing. Met so many great people along the way, and I just want to encourage some guy who's watching this and thinks, "Man, this is the weirdest thing I've ever heard of." But I would just encourage you to look into the scriptures, with the book of John and the Gospel of John, and read through it and find out what God tells you in your own life. And there is hope for this world. In America, the country we're divided and fractured, and there's so much name calling going around on Facebook, and so much road rage expressed on Facebook every day. How are we gonna come together in spite of that? There is a way to come together, and that's when we're all submitted to the authority of Jesus Christ. And God can heal our country. He can heal your life. He can heal your family. He can heal your troubled mind and put your soul at ease. And you can have a better life. And the issues that are bothering you can be fixed if you lay them at the foot of the cross and just read the gospel. And that's a Christian-y kind of a term there, but you don't have to fully understand what it means. Just ask God to show you, and He will as you read through the scripture. And that's my message. And new White Cross album coming out. We can't wait to bring it to you and come out and play it live for you. We love that. So
I can't wait.
I'm grateful.
I can't wait
to have a platform. I'm still grateful to have a platform to be able to talk to you and talk to our viewers and our fans, and just talk to people in the world. So God bless you all.